The desert, in the eyes of most people, is a place that symbolizes the extreme harshness of nature. It is not by chance that scientists call the desert the land of death. This is a place where life is pushed to its limits. Daytime temperatures can exceed 50 degrees Celsius, while at night it suddenly drops to just a few degrees. But the most frightening thing is not the temperature difference, but the almost absolute lack of water. According to officially published meteorological data, most of the large deserts such as the Sahara Gobi or Taklamakan receive less than 250 millimeters of rainfall per year. That is less than 1 part 10 of the rainfall in normal agricultural areas. In some inland areas deep in the Sahara, the annual rainfall is even only about 20 millimeters. That is equivalent to a small rain in less than 30 minutes in temperate zones. What's more serious is that even when rain does fall, the high temperatures and extremely low humidity cause most of the water to evaporate quickly before it can penetrate the soil. The ground is cracked dry and hard as a brick, completely unable to retain moisture. The scorching sun almost burns everything, including life. Therefore, agriculture, which relies on soil and water, is completely impossible in this harsh environment. No crop can survive without a stable water source and the ability to retain moisture. Not only that, human life in the desert is also under great pressure in terms of survival. Building houses, maintaining food sources, ensuring drinking water, and preventing disease in conditions of scarcity are all difficult problems. Difficult transportation, harsh climate, barren land, all create a circle of death that few places on Earth can compare to. In a UNESCO geography report, deserts are defined as extreme areas unsuitable for sustainable human settlement without groundwater or special supporting technologies. So, the appearance of an oasis in the middle of the desert is like a miracle of nature. When a place in the middle of the dead suddenly appears with coconut trees, fresh water, and even fields of crops, it is not just life, but hope. It becomes a rare gathering place where people can cling to live and maintain their culture in conditions that would normally be considered impossible. An oasis is therefore not just a place with water. It is a vital ecosystem, an important transit point on ancient trade routes such as the Silk Road, and a testament to human resilience in the face of hardship. Without understanding the deadly reality of the desert, one cannot fully appreciate the true value of an oasis, where every drop of water is likened to gold and every shade of a tree becomes a symbol of survival. And for that reason, every discovery of a new oasis, no matter how small, no matter how remote, is a remarkable event not only geologically, but also in terms of profound ecological and human significance. In the next section, we will explore exactly how an oasis is formed. How does water appear in a place where there is almost no rain and scorching sun all year round? The answer will surprise you. What is an oasis? When it comes to oasis, most people often imagine a simple image, a small pool of water in the middle of the desert with a few green palm trees growing next to it. But in fact, the scientific and geographical definition of an oasis is much more complex. An oasis is not only a place where groundwater rises to the surface, but also includes the entire ecological area formed around that water source, enough to feed people, animals, and plants, and maintain production. This is a key difference to distinguish between a single well and a true oasis. According to the definition of geographers, an oasis is a depression in the desert where groundwater or water from high mountain sources can reach the surface, helping plants grow and people can live and cultivate. The key point here is the ability to maintain life continuously and sustainably, not just the temporary presence of water. A pool of water may dry up in a few weeks, but a true oasis can last for hundreds or even thousands of years if the geological conditions are stable. The structure of a typical oasis usually consists of 3 layers: a central water source, which may be a well, a spring, or a natural pond; a cultivated area, where moist soil allows for the cultivation of crops such as dates, corn, grapes, or wheat; and an outer ring of settlements where people build their homes, live, and organize their community. In many places, large trees such as date palms are planted along the edges of the oasis to block the ingress of sand winds, stabilize the microclimate, and protect water resources from evaporation. Typical examples can be found in ancient oases in the Sahara Desert, such as Siwa or Bahariya, which were vibrant centers of settlement, agriculture, and trade for thousands of years. These places can accommodate thousands of people, possess hundreds of wells gardens, and primitive but effective irrigation systems. Oases not only sustain life, but also become centers of cultural and commodity exchange, a rare and extremely valuable thing in the vast arid desert. One thing to note is that not all places with water can be called oasis. A single well in the middle of the desert with no residents, no arable land, and no ecosystem is not qualified to be called an oasis. On the contrary, a place with a moderate amount of water, but enough to maintain a community of residents with real production activities, even if the area is small, is considered an oasis. This is the view recognized by the United Nations and arid ecology research organizations when surveying the desert fringes in Africa and Central Asia. Therefore, an oasis is not only a geological phenomenon, but also a living architecture created by both nature and humans at the same time. It represents a model of sustainable survival in extreme conditions where every drop of water is calculated for its proper use and every square meter of arable land is carefully preserved. In the context of climate change and widespread desertification, the oasis is no longer just a nostalgic image, but has become a living symbol for the question: how can humanity survive in a harsh future? Where does water come from? Decoding the mechanism of forming oases in the heart of the dry desert. One of the key questions about oases is how can there be enough water to sustain plants, crops, and human communities in a place with almost no rainfall? The answer lies in the geological structure beneath the desert, a place that is invisible to the naked eye, but is a huge natural reservoir of water that humans have only begun to understand in recent decades. First, it is important to understand that many large deserts such as the Sahara have not been completely dry throughout their history. According to geological and paleoclimatic studies between 6,000 and 10,000 years ago, this area was green land with rivers, lakes, and regular rainfall. During that period, rainwater accumulated over thousands of years, seeping into porous underground rock layers, forming fossil aquifers. These are the main water source for many oases today. These aquifers lie tens to hundreds of meters below the desert surface. They are not the fast-flowing underground rivers that one might imagine, but rather layers of porous rock filled with water, like giant sponges buried deep in the ground. When drilled into the right spot or naturally fractured in the terrain, water from these layers can rise to the surface, forming wells or springs, the very heart of an oasis. What's special is that oases usually only appear in low-lying areas where groundwater can easily rise or flow underground. Imagine a funnel. The rare rain from the distant mountains can flow underground through the rock and eventually collect at the bottom of the funnel, at a lower elevation than the surrounding terrain. That's where oases can form, as in the Bahariya or Siwa oases in the Sahara Desert, both of which are lower elevations than the surrounding terrain. In fact, some oases such as Siwa are located below sea level at an altitude of about 10 meters, allowing groundwater to easily rise to the surface. In addition, some oases are not formed by groundwater but by water flowing from the surrounding high mountains. A typical example is the oases in the Taklamakan Desert in China. This area is surrounded by the Tian Shan Mountains to the north and the Kunlun Mountains to the south. When rain or snow falls in these mountain ranges, the water does not flow directly into the desert, but rather seeps into the soil, follows underground streams, and collects in low-lying areas inside the desert, where enough water accumulates. Oases form, not due to local rainfall, but due to the indirect effect of the surrounding high mountains. A geological study published by the Chinese Academy of Geological Sciences found that most oases on the southern edge of the Taklamakan are directly hydrologically linked to canyons where snowmelt and water flow down to form temporary aquifers. This allows densely populated communities, agriculture, and commerce to thrive in the heart of the desert where rainfall is rare. It is important to note that these water sources are not renewable on an annual basis, but are the result of thousands of years of accumulation. Therefore, they are vulnerable to depletion if overexploited. Many oases today are facing serious groundwater depletion due to intensive agriculture, urbanization, and climate change. Without measures to conserve and use water sustainably, these once miraculous oases in the middle of the desert are at risk of disappearing altogether. In short, oases do not appear randomly or by magic. They are the result of a sophisticated combination of low-lying terrain, ancient aquifers, or underground flows from high mountains. Their existence depends entirely on the geological structure and underground flows that have accumulated over millennia. Therefore, each oasis that exists today is not only a testament to human survival wisdom, but also an underground water treasure that nature has given in an extremely limited way. Oases and their strategic role on the Silk Road, from stop points to international trade centers. One of the less recognized aspects of oases is their special historical role in ancient trade networks. Especially on the Silk Road, the vital trade route that connected the East and the West for more than a millennium. In the harsh geographical context of Central Asia and North Africa, where much of the trade journey had to cross vast deserts, oases became an indispensable survival fulcrum, the only place where caravans could rest, rehydrate, barter, and socialize. A typical example is the oases located on the edge of the Taklamakan Desert in the Xinjiang region, China, such as Turpan Hotan Kucha or Lulan. These cities not only existed thanks to the water from the surrounding mountains, but also developed into bustling urban areas thanks to their strategic location on the Silk Road. In ancient Chinese historical texts, such as Han Shu or Tianhan Kai, many records show that Lulan once had up to 80,000 residents and was a gathering place for merchants from India, Persia, China, and even Rome to trade. When traveling through the desert, if there were no oases, caravans would not be able to bring enough water, food, and means of survival for the journey of thousands of kilometers. Therefore, oases became mandatory transit stations. Anyone who wanted to cross the desert had to stop here. This helped the oases become places to attract people to settle, build markets, warehouses, and even administrative centers. Places that were once the initial stops for travelers quickly became thriving cities, not only thanks to water but also thanks to trade. Not only in Central Asia and North Africa, especially in the Sahara Desert, oases such as Gadam's Libya, Timimaun Algeria, or Siwa Egypt also played a similar role. They were important trade nodes connecting the salt, gold, and slave trade routes between the kingdoms of West Africa and the Mediterranean. For centuries, thanks to these oases, the trans-Saharan trade network was maintained despite the extreme climate and lack of transport infrastructure as it is today. Another noteworthy point is that the formation of oases not only affected trade, but also had a profound impact on religious systems, culture, and language. On the Silk Road, oases were the points of dissemination of Buddhism, Islam, and later Christianity into the deep regions of the Eurasian continent. The ancient Buddhist sites of Dunhuang, the Muslim temples of Kashgar, and the early Christian churches all trace their origins to roadside oases. This suggests that oases were not only physical resting places, but also transit points for human civilization and knowledge. However, the strategic role of oases also made many places the target of disputes between ancient powers. Eastern dynasties such as the Han Tang and Yuan dynasties repeatedly launched military campaigns to control this chain of oases in order to ensure trade security and political advantage. Controlling a large oasis could mean controlling an entire branch of the transcontinental trade route. In short, oases were more than just water supplies. They were strategic lifelines that kept global trade running in ancient times. Without oases, the Silk Road would not have existed. Without oases, the east-west connection would be disrupted by harsh nature. The communities that lived there did more than just survive. They became indispensable links in the economic, cultural, and religious history of humanity. Despite being the only place that sustains life in the arid land, oases are not immortal. On the contrary, they are one of the most vulnerable ecosystems on Earth. Life in oases depends on extremely sensitive conditions, from the groundwater beneath their feet to the layers of sand, the surrounding greenery, and especially the delicate balance between nature and humans. Just one deviation, no matter how small, can cause the entire ecosystem to collapse, putting the oasis at risk of disappearing. One of the biggest threats to oases is sandstorms and desert winds. Unlike regular storms, desert winds not only carry dust, but can sweep thousands of tons of sand across living areas, burying wells, fields, and even entire residential areas. According to research by the Algerian National Institute of Geology, in just the past 30 years, nearly 20% of the agricultural land around the country's oases has been encroached by sand, mainly due to changes in wind direction and the lack of sand-blocking belts. To cope, local people often have to plant rows of date palms, ferns, or desert shrubs around the oases to hold the sand and slow the wind. However, maintaining the wind-blocking system requires time, water resources, and community coordination. If resource management policies are weak or residents migrate elsewhere, the oases will be exposed to nature and gradually disappear. In addition, overexploitation of groundwater is another serious cause of many oases' decline or complete disappearance. The underground aquifers that feed oases, which were formed thousands of years ago, known as fossil water, cannot be replenished as quickly as surface rivers. Once overexploited through deep well pumping water levels, drop soils lose moisture and plants die. Research in the Bahariya oasis in Egypt has recorded a 2 to 3 meter drop in groundwater levels in just 15 years, largely due to intensive export agriculture and a rapidly growing population. In addition, global climate change is making the already sparse rainfall patterns in desert fringe areas more erratic. Rainfalls that were once rare can now disappear completely for years, drastically reducing the rate at which water is replenished. At the same time, rising temperatures increase evaporation rates, making every drop of water in an oasis more precious than ever. A 2022 UN study predicted that if global temperatures continue to rise by 2 degrees Celsius, more than 60% of existing oases in Africa and Central Asia could disappear by the end of the 21st century without serious action to protect them. It is not just nature that is affected by modern human activities, from infrastructure development, uncontrolled tourism, to over-urbanization, that are putting severe pressure on the fragile habitats of oases. In Morocco, many traditional oases have been replaced by new tourist resorts, leading to the depletion of local water resources, soil pollution, and the disappearance of the livelihoods of local residents. This is not only an ecological story, but also a story of culture and community identity being eroded every day. What do you think about the role and future of oases? Are we protecting enough of these precious natural resources? Leave a comment below to discuss, and don't forget to follow the channel to discover more fascinating stories about nature history and human survival around the world.